let's kick this off. Welcome, everybody, to the Science of Reading for Advocates. It is the Facebook group and the community that we are hoping to continue to build. Thank you for joining. We're so lucky today. We have Dr. Terrie Noland, who is this is where I'm going to mess it up, and she's so special. A thought leader on dyslexia and early literacy. She has a PhD in literacy and ed leadership. I was lucky enough to hear parts of a speech outside of in NOLA at Plain Talk. The room was packed, so I'm feeling very excited about getting this very personal time to listen to you speak. And we're so appreciative for you coming to speak to all of us here today.
Okay, so I'm Tiffany Seaman. I started teaching in 2004. I was just gonna give you a little bit of background of how I got started. I would call myself both intentional and accidental advocate. So I started out as a special education teacher, realized quickly that most of my students were having struggle with literacy. So I actually started my master's. I changed it from special education to reading. It was always a passion. And then I moved into a first grade classroom and it just grew even more. But I will tell you that, my classroom was very much guided reading groups, memorizing sight words, all of those things that I thought I was doing the best that I could for all of my students. But I realized that there were always those students that I couldn't reach no matter how hard I tried. So I kept learning, researching. I moved into a reading specialist position. Absolutely loved my time. The first part of that was very much balanced literacy, a very popular program that is used for intervention. And again, we weren't reaching all of those kiddos that I felt like I should have been reaching no matter how hard I tried. So fortunately, my district started moving into looking at brain research and the science of reading and, some Orton Gillingham trainings, some different trainings. And I realized right away that my students were making progress and it was successful. So that just grew my passion to learn more and more about literacy and the science of reading and evidence-based practices. I did step out of the classroom in 2018-19. My husband took a job in Massachusetts. So I'm in Kansas City. We moved there for a couple of years, but that gave me time to just jump into the learning. So I was reading as much as I could, had the opportunity to go to the Reading League conference in New York and Syracuse in 2019. And that was like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is where my heart is. I want to learn all I can. At the same time, my daughter, my oldest, was diagnosed with dyslexia and dysgraphia and ADHD. So that is kind of my accidental advocacy role, because then that became so much more personal. Yes, I wanted to be able to reach all of my students, but here I have my daughter coming home, emotional every evening in first grade because she wasn't getting what she needed. And I was losing my kiddo. She was not herself. And so I did start speaking up locally. I ran for Board of Education. That didn't go through, but on the premise that I wanted to change things. And I am now pursuing my doctorate through Mount St. Joseph's Reading Science Program and speaking at Board of Education meetings and trying to do what I can locally to kind of change the scene of things. So that's kind of my story.
Love it.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing, Tiffany. I'm Missy, and my story is similar. I'm an accidental advocate. I was a teacher, and I also taught in a balanced literacy classroom. There was no doubt about it. If you walked into my room, it was pretty obvious. I had all the anchor charts, full-on mini lessons, guided reading groups, writing workshop, all the above. So I even taught other teachers how to implement this in their own classrooms. It was like my summer job. And so I was all bought in. And I was actually super excited when my oldest child went to school and they were just making more advancements, and this teacher was receiving copies of leveled readers, and I helped her go in and organize those and get that all set up. And it wasn't really until my youngest son, years later, was diagnosed with dyslexia, and I realized this wasn't working for him. And it wasn't just not working for him, but then I started looking at my other two kids thinking it really didn't work for them either, even though they don't have a reading disability. They also were struggling with other concepts with language and literacy. And so I became an accidental advocate just like you. And I I just somehow ended up in a Zoom call in the middle of the pandemic with our literacy coordinator in the county with other moms because of something that was said at a board meeting that I happened to watch. It was all accidental. And that led me to going to speak at board meetings to kind of correct the narrative that that was being told, and hopefully advocate for a different story to be told in our own community. And now I advocate at both the local level, and but also at the state level. I'm a part of Decoding Dyslexia Georgia, and I love that because we're not just focused on kids who have specific learning disabilities, but we're also focused on literacy as a whole. So that is kind of how we ended up in these spaces together. And Tiffany, Elise, I know you have your own story of how you landed here as well.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of both as well. I think a lot of people do tend to be. I was intentional in that I had a son with special needs. And so going into kindergarten, I was intentionally being very much an advocate for, just one child. And then as I was focused on that and the work came home, and there were some very specific definitions of work that I was going to be receiving. And I knew exactly what it was because I had been a teacher for so long. Back to my teaching, I was lucky enough kind of partway through my teaching to be in a classroom where somebody was very explicit and meaningful in their teaching of sound structures and comprehension, and everything was very explicit and systematic. And so I had seen how that worked, and it just made sense. And it wasn't something that we knew as science of reading. It was just how kids learned how to read. And so going down that path, I'd been down that path for quite a while before my son got into class, but it had recently come to light everything that had been going on, as far as the popular programs that were available and in my school district. And so then it started with a conversation, and then it turned into oh, you're not listening to this? Well, we need to talk more about it because there's lots of children involved in this. And so, yeah, that's my story. I think it's a lot like a lot of other people's, which is nice to find all those other people. And then Dr. Noland, I would love for you to say a bit more about yourself, as I missed probably 2/3 of.
No, you did a fine job, Elise. Thank you so much. And so my story is really, I've been at Learning Ally for going on 18 years. So, back in the day, I was running around West Texas peddling cassette tapes for students that were blind and visually impaired, making sure that they had audiobooks to get access to content. And so then I'm thrust in this world, and it probably would surprise many people to know that my master's degree is in criminal justice. And so I was in prisons, going into prisons, teaching transition assistance, like, what in the world? And then I got thrust into this world. I had taught preschool, and in fact was the leader of this preschool. And one of the things that I did, I always discounted that work. Oh, yeah, it's just preschool. What does it matter? Doesn't matter. And now that I've grown and learned, thankfully, I wish I knew then what I know now about the power that I had at my disposal, and I didn't know that back then. But we're all learners and growers in this journey. So anyway, got thrust into Learning Ally. I started going to these conferences, and like, I want to be in the room. What are they talking about in there at these IDA conferences, at the ALTA conferences? Like, I need to be in the room because they're talking about some really cool stuff. So it was in 2014 that I went and got certified as an academic language practitioner, because there was something clicking for me that said, okay, the work we're doing at Learning Ally, there's something bigger here. I'm not sure what it is, but my curiosity was really piqued. So I came up, I never knew another way to teach reading other than what I understood and knew through a structured literacy a place. And so it was in that journey, and I'm growing in my role at Learning Ally, and then really stepped into a leadership role. So it was then that I'm like, okay, now I am leading at a very large scale with people across the country. I better learn about leadership. You know, you kind of find yourself in these
Mhm.
roles and they're like, oh, wait, I better learn about what this role entails. So it was then I decided to get my PhD in literacy and educational leadership. And I will say it was in that journey, Tiffany, you, my friend, going to MTSU, the wonderful work that is being done there at MTSU, just a rock and a pillar of what a model looks like. It's not what I got. So it was still
Right.
very, you want to research balanced literacy, you want to, whatever you want to read, doesn't matter, whatever you want to do. And then the leadership component, my very first case example, I mean, we're talking literacy in educational leadership. So my very first case example of a paper I had to turn in was, now you're the administrator of a school and you have a busing and transportation issue. How are you going to solve it? And I'm like, okay, wait, is there something wrong here? Why? Yeah, we got to get kids to school. I understand that. We got to get kids to school. What in the world does that have to do with getting our kids to be readers?
Yeah.
So it was missing all throughout my doctoral program. And that's where I turned outside of education. And in 2018, started studying leadership, became certified in a leadership certification program, starting to understand what it means to lead, how to lead, what it looks like, what are the moves that I can do in order to be more effective and push forward literacy for all. So that's a little bit about my journey.
I had no idea about that. I mean, wow.
Criminal
Wow.
justice. Yeah.
I mean,
sure
it
that
seems
definitely.
appropriate.
Kidding.
Exactly.
Uh-huh,
Exactly.
exactly.
It comes in handy, I
Exactly.
think. Awesome.
We are so thankful, Dr. Nolan, to learn from you today because I mean, I've heard you talk a couple of times, and I was at Plain Talk as well. People behind the screens, she had so many people in there, and it was just inspiring the way that you present things. Because this can be an emotional, roller coaster. It's emotional work, but the way that you kind of help us think through it is so helpful. So we appreciate it. So I guess my first question for you would be, um, as an advocate, how should we view our role in this work? So, really, what can one advocate do?
Mm. Yeah, and Tiffany, I'm so glad you were in the room that day, and so many others were in the room. And I remember the power of that room. The power of the room that day at Plain Talk in New Orleans was the amount of people that came up to me afterward and said, you just clarified what I need to do in this work. So often we get people coming to this work accidentally or intentionally, but who am I to make a difference? I think we've probably all said that. Who am I? And that's where I've got to give you the hope and the realization and the affirmation that you've got to understand your role is a leader in this work. Like I said, I've been studying leadership. Okay. We think that leader is a title, is a position, is the person that rains down the commands. And especially in education, boy, we think that about superintendents, about principals. They are the leaders in the building. And I'm saying we've gotten it wrong. We've gotten it really wrong because leadership is nothing more than my ability to influence other people. And if you see that your role gives you leadership ability, then you're wrong. Because even like me, I stepped into roles before I had the knowledge. I got a seat at the table before I actually grew myself as a leader. So understand that the role doesn't make the leader makes the role. Leadership is about my character. It is about how I show up every day. It's about how I treat people. It's about how I value people. It's about how I care for people. It's about how I extend my hand to people. It's about how I advocate for our kids. So all of you listening, you've got the power. Your role, doesn't matter what your role is, a teacher, an administrator, a parent. So often it's our parents that say, well, who am I to do anything? Well, if not you, then who? If not you, then who is going to do this work? Who's going to stand up for your child? Who's going to stand up for the other children around them? So remember, it is you, and you can step into the role of leadership. I like to also think about leadership is, first of all, we got to lead ourselves. Whew, that's a hard one for me, is to lead myself and direct myself every day. You're all shaking your heads. Yes. Whoo, that's a tough one. But no matter where I am, if you're a parent, a liaison, a teacher, whoever you are, speech language pathologist, sometimes you see yourselves as not, kind of really having this wobbly role in the school, and where do I go and who do I talk to and all of those things. Remember that you're in the center, and you have the ability to influence up to the people that sit positionally above you. You have the ability to influence down to the people that are positionally below you. And you've got the ability to influence across with the people that are positionally beside you. Okay. Remember that you're in the center, and I can go up, I can go down, and I can go across, no matter who I am. A parent wanting to go and stand in front of a school board, a state legislature, guess what? Those people are positionally above you. Doesn't mean you can't lead them. It doesn't mean that you can't have impact. Because I look at Missy. Missy, you've done that, right?
A little bit. Yeah. But it's scary sometimes too, because I do have those thoughts. I love that you said that, because I think all the time how we always say I'm just a mom. That literally. So like, I love how you just made us all feel like we're not just a just.
You are justified. You are justified in that role. I'm just, because when I'm just, I am arguing for my limitations rather than seeing the abundance that could be before me. Let's don't argue for our limitations. Let's make sure that we are arguing for what the abundance mindset puts us forth to say, we're going to step into this cause, and we're going to do it with love, and we're going to do it with care and concern for other people. That's what makes us leaders.
I have to ask you though, because I know that there were a lot of times that I felt like this was a very big job, and it wasn't even my job, and it wasn't even my second job, because being a mom and, the job that pays the bills, which I also love, but a whole nother story. Those two jobs are overwhelming sometimes as is. So then to think, okay, I'm going to write speeches on one Thursday a month. I'm going to email all of these people, and I'm going to do all of this. And at the same time, carry all of the emotional weight of this, because obviously, if for any of us who are here, or for any of us who are in the struggle, there's an emotional overload and overwhelm piece to advocating for people that you love or care about. It's not just my children, it's other children in the district and other districts. So how do you deal with it when that feeling of being overwhelmed kind of stops you or makes it hard to keep going?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I know all three of you have probably done this, and the people listening today have done this. Do you know how many times I have stomped through my kitchen and my living room, just whoa, whoa, whoa! Oh my, can you believe? And my husband's sitting there trying to watch TV, and he's doing, you're laughing because you've done it. Fist raised in the air, because I tutor kids, and I'll get a call from one of my parents about something that happened at school, and then boy, I just go on a rant. You know what? Let those feelings have their way with you. I heard this one time about grief. So often we want to push away grief because we're supposed to be so strong and solid. You know what? If you get a moment of grief coming your way, you get a moment of overwhelm coming your way, let it have its way with you and let you crumble to the floor. But guess what? As an advocate and a leader in this work, I've got the resiliency and the resolve to stand back up because I know the abundance that's ahead of me. That was some of the best advice I ever got, because so often we want to push it away, push it to the side. Nuh-uh. You stomp around that kitchen. You raise your hands in the air. Take a deep breath and then collect yourself. And then you can come back into that moment where you've got some clarity. Yeah.
That feels really heavy and strong. I mean, the like being given the permission because you feel out of control. I mean, I know that all of the times that I have felt that way, I feel like I should be able to keep this together. I have a company, I run my household, my kids are happy, healthy for the most part. Why can't I keep it together? And it just feels overwhelming. And to think, I probably should just sit there with that.
Yeah.
And be mad and be sad and frustrated.
But then we've got to have the internal composure to come back out of it. Right. It's, when COVID did come along, I think we all did this too. We kind of sat there in that fog. Remember at the beginning, I remember you just kind of would sit in this fog. That's because your brain was actually trying to process what to do. It's the whole amygdala was kicking in, that fight, flight, all of that stuff. And is this foggy situation. And I think it's the same thing in this work is no, you're going to go through the fog. Okay. That's your amygdala working. It's that fight, flight, or freeze moments. And let it have its way with you. And then have that resolve to say, okay, I'm good now. This is where the collaboration of people come together, is when your story can be so powerful for somebody else's story. Yeah. I think all of you have probably seen that too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, you talking about this getting back up, it takes sometimes other people to help you get there, even though we're so independent and strong. And, people say, wow, you're so strong. How do you do this? Or how do you, whatever you say, well, I didn't pick to be strong. I'm being strong because the reason is worth it. The children are worth it, whatever. But there are days when that strong just doesn't feel enough. And so then you find somebody and you just talk about it. You just vent. Like you're saying, you kind of like let the feelings come, let the fog wash over, and then it becomes clearer at the end.
Yeah. And the thing about the overwhelm and why you got to go through it and come back up. If you sit in the overwhelm makes you silent. Think about that. Overwhelm makes you silent. Because I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't have a community to go to. And if we are going to be advocates in this work, silence isn't an option. That's not an option at all. And so I've got to be able to have my voice, not just my physical voice, but my voice through my words, my voice through my actions, my voice, how I show up, all of those things. I mean, that's what advocates are and what they need to do. And if we sit in the overwhelm, then we're just going to become silent.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you said that, because I can think of so many times when I have been overwhelmed and I do go silent. My friends know I kind of just pull back, and it's almost like I'm kind of known for my emails. If any of my friends are watching, I send emails. I write epistles when I am advocating. The words will like slosh in my head for a minute, and then I go really silent and I get overwhelmed, and then that resilience part, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do always get back up. And when I get back up, I am just inspired to just say things that I couldn't have said probably 3 days before because I was in that silent period, but not staying there is so important. I think we don't sometimes always even understand the emotional toll and the overwhelmed toll that comes from advocating. So the way you put that is just that roller coaster of overwhelm, resilience over. I mean, that is just a beautiful way to put it. You always say it in a way that I think it, but I don't always ever get out on paper. Terrie, it's amazing. But I think all of us have probably experienced that before. It's so hopeful.
Yeah. And I think one of the overwhelms too come in the fact, and Elise, I think you said that it was in all of you probably, that I started out advocating for one. And then I got overwhelmed because then I realized I needed to advocate for everybody. I got to save the world, and I love that. I love the mantra. I do, because I am a possibilist. I am a futurist. I'm a believist, whatever it is that you want to put the IST on the end of it, because I am all those things. But there are days that it gets a little bit overwhelming. But this is where I think, and it was the words of Ronald Reagan that actually said this: do for one what you wish you could do for many. So set the big vision aside for a second. If you are in a point in this journey that the vision of all kids is too big, okay, do for one what you wish you could do for many. Because if I am going to advocate for one, then my consistency in that advocacy will eventually compound. Consistency compounds. Think about it. Okay, let's put it this way. I consistently eat ice cream. Guess what's going to compound? My right?
Yeah, that might be true.
Exactly. And so while you're doing the advocating for one, you're like, I'm not doing that much. I'm just not. I just feel worthless. Hang on, because consistency compounds. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that silent piece, like that staying in the silence. I heard once, when they say being silent is being complicit. And I don't want to say that too broadly, because it is okay to be scared to advocate, and it's not everybody's place to do it in one way or the other. Like, you can do the small scale, but like when you see something happening, it felt like, for me, it was like I couldn't stay there. I couldn't just let that happen when I knew what should be happening, what could be happening for children. And so that I love the idea of being able to sit in it, take it in, get over it, and get back up. That's just super powerful.
Agree with that. I would say that I was the quietest, most introverted kid. And now people look at me like, wait, you go to board meetings and speak? That is not who you are, but like you said, Elise, when you are so passionate about this, you cannot help but do something, say something. And maybe it's not speaking at a board meeting. You're right. Maybe it's sending an email. Maybe it's, going out in your community and trying to help some way. But I think we all have ways that we can in our own way. But I think that's great. And it does help me to have a community. So I'm so thankful for this, because I can get down on myself and I can take in the negativity and focus on that more than, there are these people that are saying thank you for what you're doing. But I can also tend to focus on the people that maybe aren't listening and getting down upon myself for that and not making that change. But I do appreciate the community.
Well, just that there is a lot of gaslighting that happens when you advocate. And so
Exactly.
that piece about finding your support, because sometimes there aren't people saying thank you. You just know
Right.
that this is something, because a lot of the time the people that are getting taken advantage of don't even know it. But that, and then there's this gaslighting that happens that makes you feel a little bit nuts. So if you are talking to other people and you're continually staying in it, in the know, trying to learn more, it just makes it so much.
Um, this path of advocacy is riddled with so many emotions. We've talked about that, just the overwhelm, the success. And in the middle of all that, like sometimes you're flying high, like you advocate so hard and the vote goes through and it's for you. It's like what you've been fighting for. And then other times the vote goes through or your district does something that is just completely the wrong thing. Like you're like, how could you possibly have that as one of your interventions after we've had this conversation for 5 years? I can't even believe that. Or, and so it's the failures that come with this are so real. And I feel like because it starts off as a personal battle, and then it does, even as we're advocating for others, remain personal, because we see those kids in so many ways, like our kids. Like when I see the kids that are still being failed, I see my little boy and I know how that kid is struggling because I know I've had a front row seat. So when something goes wrong, it can feel so like I did a bad job, or I dropped the ball, or I didn't say the right thing, or we didn't get the right person in the seat. Like there's so many factors, and it can feel like you have just not done your job. I remember very distinctly sitting in a board meeting. I was about to speak and they approved a program that was just absolutely like, how could we even think about approving that program? Like I'm over here fighting, shout out to Learning Alley. I'm over here fighting for like books, audio books for kids. It's just a simple resource. And they're approving a program that is proven to have zero effect on kids who struggle with reading. And it's not a cheap purchase. And I'm just feeling so internally like I just failed, it's so personal. So that happens a lot in this work. So Terrie, what kind of advice would you give our advocates who are watching today for when that happens? How do we just absorb that and then keep moving forward?
So I don't know if you've heard the acronym for FEAR, false evidence appearing real.
Wow.
FEAR, false evidence appearing real. I think about fear, and trust me, Missy, I know those things happen. Well, I know the story that you're talking about. Those things absolutely happen, and you're over there, and like I need the courage to stand up. But I'm fearful. And hey, you know what? And Tiffany, I said this in New Orleans. Let's get real for a moment. You're going to stand up in front of a school board meeting, and every one of you are going to come out there with your armpits sweating and your hands sweating and sweat going down your back. And I mean, let's just get real for a moment. Okay. So fear is irrational. It's irrational because it's false evidence appearing real. If you're a parent, you've done this. Your child does not come home at the minute that the clock strikes on curfew. What do? In my mind, where are they? They're in a ditch on the side of the road. Every parent has done this. And I mean, my goodness, I am 50 years old. My mom still does it with me. She tracks me on her phone. Come on. Our brains are making up stories for us. So that fear is false. It's false because we've made up this fantastic, elaborate story that really isn't real. And so when I talk about fear, I'm going to say your armpits are going to get sweaty. Do it anyway. You're going to stumble over your words. Do it anyway. Missy, Tiffany, Elise, all of you.
Y'all watch my speeches. I made up words.
Yeah. You're going to make up words. Do it anyway. Yeah. Because if you wait, think about this. If you wait until you are perfect, you'll never do it. Because perfect never comes. Perfect never comes. Perfect only is the result of consistency, honing my skill, getting good, growing, learning. And then now I can come close to perfection. The thing I love about this group that you've created on Facebook is you're sharing so generously of your resources, of your speeches, of things like that. Because so many people are like, I don't know what to say. I don't know where to start. I don't know those things. And so, my goodness, this group of women have lifted the load for you. But guess what? Get good. Practice it. Do it. Stand in front of people. Brene Brown talks all the time about your terrible first time. Think about it. If you're going to learn a new skill, the very first time that you do it, let's just face it, you're going to suck. Okay. You're going to be bad.
Yeah.
It's going to be bad. And that's okay. You did it. You got in the ring. And that's what matters in this advocacy work. And you're going to do it the next time. And then you're going to do it the next time and the next time. And all of this is I'm going to be fearful because I've made up the stories in my head. But guess what? My courage is stronger than my fear. My courage overpowers my fear because I see the greater good on the other side. So courage is not the opposite of fear. Courage is doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. Courage is standing up and doing it anyway. I always share this story of something that happened in our family last year. It has nothing to do with reading, but we experienced a fire at our house last summer. My older boys were home, and it happened, around midnight. And my oldest son was here, and my husband was out of town. And my oldest son, our back kitchen had caught on fire. And so when I realized I did the wrong thing and just started yelling help, when I smelled the smoke and got up, I started yelling help. I didn't yell fire. I did the wrong thing. But anyway, he bolts out of the room. And there was a moment where he looked at me dead in the eye and he said, "Mom, you get out of here." Courage stood up big and bold in a moment when he looked me dead in the eyes and he said, "Mom, you get out of here." Because courage stands up in those big moments. If it's going to stand up in the big moments, why in the world would it not stand up in the little moments? Why in the world would it not stand up when you hit enter and send on that email? Why wouldn't it? Because it's going to, and this story unique to our family. You can all name a story in your families when courage has stood up big time. So why in the world would it not show up in the little moments? So courage is not the opposite of fear. It's standing up in the face of this irrational fear that we've created for ourselves. So if you go to the board meeting and if you do your speech and your voice is shaky and you're just make sure wear a lot of deodorant and a jacket that can cover all that. But seriously, it stood up, and you stood up for kids. Like, that's the greater good of what we're trying to achieve here. Here's another thing, and I want to hear from y'all. Courage inspires courage. Elise, have you ever been inspired by Missy or Tiffany?
Oh, 100%. It's how we all became friends. It was that, we watched each other speak and advocate and thinking, oh my gosh, I need to have those people because it makes me feel stronger.
Yeah. So Tiffany.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it made me feel, these two ladies, I saw them speaking. I don't know how excited I was that they were going to speak together for advocacy, because that's where I'm like, I don't know anyone around me. I'm trying to do this, but these two ladies do it beautifully, and they're inspirational to me, and I want to hear them and then reach out to them because I need their support or I need to learn from them. Yeah.
Yeah. It was so, to me, you're right. I didn't like I said earlier, I didn't say it the way Terrie said it, but like, so the way Missy says it. I'm the Southern girl over here. But yeah, I mean, I remember saying, like, look at these other moms who have similar backgrounds, but we live all over the US. Like, we're not close, but the encouragement just from seeing them do something that does take a lot of courage. I don't know about you guys, but going to the board meeting is standing, I don't know, our room just feels huge and I feel so small, full of podium, and they're kind of sitting above you. It feels like you're talking to your principal. I have like that principal complex teacher thing going on. Like it's time for an observation. And I think it's about to do things well. And so it takes so much courage to go up there. And you're right, you're shaking. And I had too many words the first time I spoke. It was 3-minute limit and the clock was ticking and I was like flying. I'm not even sure you could even decipher my speech. You should go listen to it if you need to go laugh on our page. But you know, and I mispronounced several words because I was just flying and I wanted them to know, like they had to hear the story. So I will say doing it and knowing that other parents had done it was so, you're right, it just spurred me on. And then also too, in the middle of the fight, when you're doing it, there's something about that spurs you on too, because you realize they're just people too. I remember thinking, I just talked to a board member. She's just a person who got elected. She's just another human. She's not anybody special. And the superintendent, he's just a person that has a big job in this county, but he's just another person too. So like, he should care about this. And so, I had a meeting with him one-on-one, and I remember like being so nervous, like I had to have all the perfect words. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go in there and be me, because he needs to hear the raw version of the story and how it is not pretty and he needs to fix it. And so, yeah, you're right. It is. We're so spurred on by others, but we're also somehow we became part of this community, this bigger community of advocates. And, I have a community in Georgia. I'm lucky. I just have like a great group of advocates here, but I'm also super blessed that in the middle of this, I stumbled into Elise and Tiffany and you, Terrie. I mean, all of you guys are just amazing advocates. And knowing that there's this world of people out there who are doing unique things, even though we have a common cause, we're all doing it in a slightly different way. And we all have a different edge and a different skill set. And I learned so much from each of you guys. Like I have gotten better at what I do by watching Tiffany and Elise and Terrie and hearing your words. And I feel more confident now when I go in, because I feel like I have my own cheering section in the background, right? And so, Terrie, I'd love for you just to kind of talk about that, because you lead a community of educators at Learning Alley that I happen to be a part of, and I love it. And it is the most, if you're not in that group, you should join. I'm telling you, it's the most beautiful group of people who are constantly cheering people on. And you just like, I think I went to the Spotlight on Dyslexia recently, and I remember you saying, come on in, I've got some, cookies and lemonade for you. And it's that I'm sitting on a front porch, and I'm in a community, and we're all on the same street, and we're all going to have, a sip of sweet tea. I'm down here in Georgia, so sweet tea and some cookies. So what is special about a community of people working towards a common goal? Because you live that out, Terrie, and it's so beautiful in your community.
Well, community is powerful, and it's so interesting. And I see that with you three. You actually create the community that you wish you had. Okay? Think about it. All three of you created the community you wish you had. And so because there was something missing in your life, like, oh my goodness, we need a group for advocates. Why don't we just create it? You created a space that said, I want like-minded people coming together around a cause that is bigger than me. And because I know I can't do it alone, that I need other people to come around that cause. And so there's something too very unique about community building. We've all been a part of communities on social media that are a very toxic place to be. And so when you build and you nurture and you pour your heart and your soul into a community space, you want it to be the culture too that you wish you had in your learning and growth journey. And so, I just urge everyone here in this space that is a part of this Facebook group that you respect the culture. You respect the culture of giving, of straightening each other's crowns. I know we've heard that before. Let's straighten each other's crowns instead of trying to rip your crown off. And I said that the A apple should be A apple I, and you say it should be
Yeah.
A apple alligator. And we got an applause there. And here's what I say.
We're all feeling it.
If we're arguing about silly stuff like that, I mean, well, first of all, I say, well, that's awesome, because it means that those two people truly get it and understand what a structure looks like. We've done good work. But let's make sure that we value every person. And when I see you as valuable, I'm going to add value to you. That's my job. That's what all of you are doing too in this space of adding value to other people. Respect the culture, grow the culture that needs to be here, because you are creating the community that you wish you had, and now you do have. Here's something I want us to think about, Missy. You talked about in this journey. Remember, we're all on a journey. And I like to think about this as a number line that, think about a number line. If I'm starting over here at 0, but then my trajectory goes up to 10. Okay. So it's going up to 10. Think about where you were in this journey when you were at 0. I didn't know the first thing. In fact, I was pretty much unconscious that I was incompetent. Missy, it's like
two hands. Yes.
I had no clue. I was flying blind in this world. And then as I start to learn and grow, then I'm moving up and I'm moving up and I'm growing and I'm learning and I'm reading more stuff and attending daily to my growth journey and moving along the way. All of you in this space, you're at different points in that trajectory, right? Some of you might be a 1, some of you might be a 4, a 7. I never say anybody's a 10 because we've all got room to grow. But the power of community says that if I'm a 4, if I'm a 7, I'm going to reach back and grab those zeros because I know what it was like when I got started. My job, I'm going to reach back and grab you. And as frustrating as it can be time after time to do it over. Oh, why don't these people get it? Why don't they know? Never forget where you were when you started, and don't you wish somebody would have come and grabbed you? So that, in my mind, is what community is all about, is the people that are further come and grab and love and pull the hands of those that are just beginning the journey.
That is really so incredibly beautiful and so true. I mean, I think personally, I remember the people who grabbed me when I was a 0. And some of you, I mean, you guys are part of that initial journey of I just was frustrated. And I knew I had big thoughts. I didn't know how to say them the right way. And I knew I had some learning to do. And I was mad at myself too, because I was part of the problem of my lack of knowledge. But so I didn't need anyone else to remind me what I didn't know. But what I needed was exactly what you said, just someone to pull me up. So that is just, gosh, I'm going to I get emotional.
Yeah, because we've been there, I think, and everyone brings something that we can learn from. Even if you're at a 0 and I'm at a 4, I know I can learn from you. I think, and like you were saying, Missy, I've gotten so emotional and I've let my emotions kind of get carried away with that. And sometimes maybe I've said something that oh, I wish I wouldn't have said it like that. So I think we just have so much to share with one another about, I wish I would have done that differently. And, if you're starting out, like, hey, I've been there. You can feel so emotional about this that maybe it makes you feel like you just want to scream and attack someone, right? But there's a better way, and this works better. And here's, something I can give to you. I think we all just have those different, I love that we have those different experiences that we're able to share and build upon.
Yeah, it's like we're at a giant big table, and our table can always get right, and everyone at the table
Right.
chair looks a little different. Like I'm just thinking, like Elise, you were so great at creating this webinar space. That was a little bit outside of my comfort zone, and
Much better learning.
that I live in, there's people who are good at, and you'll know who I'm talking about, but they're good at like pulling data. And there's other people that are good at like creating graphics and getting our word to look pretty in our community. And there are other people that are great networkers, and there are other people that are just loud and that's me. They just don't get quiet. And so, and what's great is making sure that everyone's chair can be at the table. Whatever piece they can bring is so valuable. I have a friend who will not speak at the board, but she will write the best emails. I mean, and I think I'm a great email writer, but when I read her emails, I'm like, girl, you slayed it. I sent her a text a few hours ago and said, that email is fire. Like, response. I wonder how they're going to respond to that. And so, like, I get to cheer her on as she advocates in the way that is best for her. And that I just think that that's what makes this community so beautiful. So Terrie, we're going to give some questions in just a second, but I want to say thanks for just like, I feel so even more inspired to go further up that curve you were talking about, and hopefully make bigger changes. And if nothing else, help another advocate who's behind me come on up, because it's kind of fun up here. It's kind of fun when people start listening and changes start getting made. And even if it's one kid that's life is better for something you said, like that is fun. That is life-giving. That is, oh my gosh, she's going to get the intervention she needs, because I showed up and I helped someone. So, yeah. So I hope we have some questions. Hopefully we do. If not,
we don't have any questions, but I feel like it's a big topic and there's a lot of,
to think about
emotions that are surrounding this. And I think because we have left kind of the specifics of like, it's not, this is exactly how you write a letter. It's more that there is a feeling and there is an environment and there's more that can help us be advocates than just how to write the letters. And I know that in the group we're trying to help by giving ours. That was our purpose. Is Missy and I and Tiffany have all been contacted like, oh, what would you say if? And we're like, here, just use what we have.
Copy paste.
Yeah. But there is this, we forget to kind of fill up the other piece, which is not to sound cheesy, but like the soul piece of it. The how do I do this? How do I keep going? How do I, because it's not just a pen and paper fight. It is emotional. It is raw sometimes, whether it's my kid or somebody else's. I have those feelings, Missy. Like you were saying, like I look at a child and I see them in my class, or I see them as my kid, and I think of how much their parents love them, not any less than I do. They just don't know that their child can have this, and but I think that the emotion and the peace, and I was so excited to just listen to you, Terrie, because I feel like even though I'm here, I'm not at a zero anymore. You sometimes have to be reminded why we're all not, we know why we're doing it. It's kind of the, okay, get up, keep going,
Like,
Yeah, I
is the question I keep asking myself, because I've been doing this for a couple of years now. And so there have been so many failures. Like there's lots, guys, if you're out there, it's not always going to be perfect. Yeah. We just passed a big bill in Georgia. There were a lot of people who made that happen, not just little old Missy, but there's so many like parts of that bill that need to be fixed. And so like, I could see that as a failure or as a great place to start and get back up and fight for the parts that are missing, or fight for the, what's on the ground level.
Did get a question.
Oh,
It says, where do you start with advocating for the science of reading in our school district? This person is in Maryland specifically, but Maryland supports the science of reading, but it's hard to figure out what actual steps are being taken to implement. What are some small steps we can take? I think that's a good way to kind of like get us started into, ending this, but helping the next.
Yeah. I mean, I'll answer from my perspective. So often in these groups, people do ask that question, where do I start? And like, here is my response. And then all of you, if you want to chime in too, you start with you. You start with you. Remember, I said that in this leadership world, the hardest person to lead is yourself. So you start with you. Okay. All right. What does that mean? Starting with me. Starting with me that says, what am I going to do to be very intentional in growing my knowledge about this work, growing my knowledge about the school district, growing my knowledge and understanding of what's actually happening, growing my knowledge by attending a board meeting, being a listener, being a learner, being someone that grows me first. I think we're misguided when we say, oh, the first thing you do is show up at a board meeting and do these things. No. You haven't done your work to grow your knowledge about the inner workings of the school. You got to start with you and be a listener and ask questions. Be a questioner about what is going on. And I know we're looking for those high leverage moves because we all want it to happen tomorrow. We don't turn the Titanic in a day. We can't. And so what are the things that I can do? You want to start today? Dig into the website. Go see what you can find. Ask somebody a question, grow your knowledge, grow your understanding. And then when you start growing yourself and your knowledge, then you're going to know what email to send. Then you're going to know what board meeting to show up to. Then you're going to know who your allies are because you've laid the groundwork.
That is just about perfect.
I totally agree with you. I mean, everything that started mine was just asking questions. What's the research behind this? Why was this decision made? And it wasn't like I'm coming at you to fight you right away. I'm trying to figure out who my allies are. I'm trying to figure out why these decisions were made so that I have information for that email or that board talk or, things to go on. But it's that research piece too. It's just, what is the school district next to me doing? What are the stats in my state? What are the, just kind of like trying to understand where you are.
And there might be that perspective of someone who thinks they're doing the right thing, like I have before. That's another understanding. So maybe someone making this decision doesn't realize or have that knowledge that what they're doing might not be the best decision. And so, yes, asking questions, like you said at first, kind of gives you that backup perspective. I've been there before. What did it take me to get where I am now? Because they might just not understand. I know when I came back, so when I came back from Massachusetts to Kansas is when I kind of started. So I right away started diving into what is Kansas doing right now. They had just released their dyslexia handbook and what are the things that they're rolling out. So I started the Kansas Science of Reading Facebook group to get that information out. And I was just talking to some people today that said, teachers don't know what's happening. So we needed a place where we could share that knowledge and what's happening, what resources are available, like letters, training is available for this date. They had no idea. Oh, I can go sign up. Yeah, you can go sign up. And then from there, seeing what the district is doing related to those changes and asking questions, going and finding those people that are making those decisions and understanding why they're making the decisions that they are, I think is where I started as well.
It's like assuming the best, right?
Exactly. And sometimes that's hard. But
I was like, did you know we have a dyslexia book? And on page 14, it says this. And they're like, I didn't know. And I was like,
I didn't know.
Right. And my first board meeting, I went with a group of advocates, and we all spoke, and we had like kind of synced up messages, like an order. So we piggybacked so we could have more of a presence. But we also gave each of the board members a packet of the dyslexia handbook they had never seen, and some stats about balanced literacy versus structured literacy. And like, we just assumed the best. Terrie, I remember coming, I forget the name of the event because my brain doesn't do well with things like that, but it was last year. We were in another event, and it was about advocacy, I think, as well. And I loved how you encouraged the teachers in the space, but I think this works for parents and board members and administrators and whoever you are in this space, librarians. Just start where you are, but also have a conversation with the person next to you and see where they are too. Right. I loved that power of just like, I'm not going into this to change you and get you to where I am. If you're only a 0 and I'm a 4, you can't go, like you said, you can't turn the Titanic around in a day. Right. And so just find out where they are. And if they take their next best step, I remember that so clearly. If they take their next best step, then that is huge. That's the first step on a million steps on this journey, but it's a step in the right direction. And you call it falling forward. And I love that, or failing forward. Actually, I think it's failing forward. Yeah. I love that, because we're like, it may not always be perfect, and they may mess up. They may, get the and the ah. There may be some things going on there. But it's a step forward, and that's huge. And we should be celebrating versus critiquing how it wasn't the perfect one, and it wasn't we get to be their cheerleaders as they do what we did. Maybe we didn't have an audience when we were failing, and so now everyone seems to have one, and so we get to be their cheerleaders, and I think that's huge. And the power of influencing the person beside you, because you know them and you heard their story and you just gave them a safe space to learn and not be judged, is huge. So I learned all that from you, Terrie. That is all like,
I'm glad you remembered all that, Missy. That's good. Yeah, you made me think of something too. And this is kind of some new thinking too. We need to give ourselves a little bit of grace sometimes, because we see a wobble. Oh, okay, that was just a little wobble, when sometimes we call it this big failure. Oh, I failed miserably. No, you just wobbled. Okay. I think all of us on this call are old enough to probably know weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Just put that in your head. Okay. So, I mean, that's really, it should be the advocate theme song, right? Advocates wobble, but they don't fall down. Yeah. So don't confuse a little wobble with a fail, and don't fail and call it a wobble likewise. Right. Yeah.
Gosh, that's a great spot for us to end on. I'm gonna end us right there. I know that people had only so much time, but we are gonna make sure that this recording is available in multiple ways, so that people can access it. And again, thank you so much, Terrie, for taking time. I mean, just taking time to do this. It's huge for all of us. So,
and I think it put into perspective the importance of this community. So just helping us make it what everyone needs. So thank you for sharing that with us, making it what we need. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys all for coming, watching, and it will be available soon. The wonderful Elise is going to make that happen.